watching Shalom TV, celebrating Jewish culture. Funding for Shalom TV has been provided by the following. And by viewers like you.
Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I have the pleasure of sitting now with a man who is doing fabulous work in an area that many American Jews simply would never imagine. My guest is Joseph Gitler, founder and chairman of an organization named Leket Israel, known in English as Table to Table, which is Israel's food rescue network. It's a national food bank that distributes 60,000 meals each month to the poor and hungry in Israel. And Joseph, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I am fascinated by your work, and as I said, the image of the Jew is always wealthy. The reality is there are poor and hungry Jews, even in Israel. And I say even in Israel because that's another image, that somehow Israel is this country that takes care of everybody on its own, and that how could there ever be anybody poor and hungry in Israel? So first I want you to describe for us who is the poor and hungry in Israel that Leket Israel is addressing.
Okay. Well, I think the reason that I even got into this business was because I moved to Israel about 11 years ago, in 2000. And what happened was in 2003, when I decided to start Leket Israel, it was out of concern that I was hearing about new poverty. Israel had become a much wealthier country, and with that, a lot of people had gotten left behind. Very much an American sort of story, very similar to what goes on here in the United States. So while historically the poverty in Israel was in the ultra-Orthodox community, in the Israeli Arab community, certain immigrant groups that had come over from poorer countries, suddenly you were hearing about working poor, people who had jobs and had lost them because of a lack of tourism or because of a bust in the high-tech market. And as an American, I was just really concerned that we had working poor in Israel. I just couldn't believe it. And it just led me to get into this business of trying to help those in need.
Okay, Joseph, who the heck are you? I mean, you're an American.
American Israeli now,
Okay.
I guess.
You were born in New York. You grew up, you told me, in Fort Washington.
In Washington Heights till I was
Washington
15.
Heights. Then you moved to New Jersey.
To Teaneck, yeah.
And you get married on the younger side.
21 years old, to my
Okay.
wife, Leela, from Toronto.
And then you and Leela make Aliyah.
Yeah, we made Aliyah in September. We made Aliyah, and that's really actually an important part of the Leket story. September 2000, September 5th, 2000, not that we're counting, we make Aliyah. It's the height of the Oslo optimism. Really, no one said to me, oh, it's so dangerous there. You're leaving your family, it's hard to make a living. That was the sort of reception we got at the time. And of course,
you also have a law degree.
Yeah, I worked as a lawyer here in New York.
Did you go to Israel expecting to practice law?
No, I went to work in business there. I knew I was going to be working in a family business when I made
A
Aliyah.
family business?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I knew I was going to be working there, and I was very fortunate to have that opportunity.
It means also you had family in Israel.
Yes, my
Okay.
wife's brother and aunts and uncles, plenty of family, and a familiarity, of course, with Israel. I spent a few years studying in yeshiva there, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And we came at this great time, and 2 weeks later, the Intifada broke out. Right before Rosh Hashanah in the year 2000.
And what was that like? Were you shocked?
We were, life changed overnight. I mean, suddenly there were security guards at my daughter's nursery, and the malls, they started to close up entrances to the parking lot. Everything changed really, really quickly. But we continued with our life, and we were fortunate where we lived that there were no major incidents. I mean, things happened to the west, to the east, to the north, to the south, but in our little bubble.
Where was the bubble?
We live in Ra'anana, which is near Tel Aviv.
Gorgeous community.
Yeah, beautiful community. We're very fortunate to live there. And, so we just continued living life. I was working in this company, traveling, living our life and helping, but being more concerned and praying for our soldiers, and praying for the Jewish people in the state of Israel, and that everything should calm down, and please God, we should have peace. That's what we were thinking. And what happened is that because of that intifada, and then because of September 11th, and with what came with that, the tourism and the lack of high-tech jobs, suddenly you started to hear about Israelis suffering. And no one's starving, and it's important for all your viewers to understand. The poverty that I discuss and I'm talking about in Israel is not an African poverty. It's not an Asian or South American, the terrible things we see on television. It is a Western-style poverty. People not getting the right calories. People may be going to bed a little bit hungry. But no one, thankfully, is starving to death. Okay, but there are a lot of people who need help to get through the day. And that's what Leket's about. How do we get the right food to those in need through wonderful agencies throughout the state of Israel who are serving the poor?
Okay, do you leave your job and begin to create Leket Israel?
So what I did was I took a 3-month sabbatical from my job, expecting to try to get something small off the ground. I wasn't exactly sure at the time what that would be. And then I figured I'd go back into the business. But that was 8 years ago. And we're here talking, so I guess I'm still involved.
You've told us how people became poor. Tell us more about who they are.
Okay, well, today, unfortunately, it crosses all lines in Israel. It's the ultra-Orthodox who've made their life decisions and are sitting and learning in yeshiva, and of course, it's hard to make a living learning in yeshiva. It's the Israeli Arab community, which struggles tremendously to get good jobs in Israel.
What percentage of Leket Israel's work is with the Arab Israeli community? Okay,
well, I'm going to take two sides to that. First of all, about a third of our workers are Israeli Arabs.
Interesting.
Mostly women. I'm going to talk about. It's an amazing project. And of the recipients, it's hard for me to know exactly, but I would say probably between 10 and 15% of our beneficiaries are in the non-Jewish community. That means Druze, Israeli Arabs, Bedouins, and a lot of African refugees who've escaped war and suffering in Darfur and places like that, have crossed the desert, very similar to the Ethiopian story, to get to the Promised Land, where they assume the Jewish community will take good care of them, putting us in a big catch-22. But and we're doing our best to try to help that situation as well.
Joseph, some of the work you do involves relationships Leket Israel has with other organizations and agencies.
Correct.
Tell me about that.
Okay. The way Leket is structured is that all the food that we're able to rescue throughout the state of Israel is redistributed through a network of 290 agencies.
Ethan, stop there. I read that about you, and I said to myself, what an interesting verb to use about food. Rescuing food. What is that?
Okay, well, I didn't make up the term. Food rescue is the term of art, which was actually introduced not far from where we're sitting here today in New York City with an organization called City Harvest, which 30-something years ago, a lovely woman said, what is going on with all this food that's being wasted? She said, I'm going to rescue it. And it's become this term that's used throughout the world to signify perfectly good, nutritious, healthy food which is safe and which is going to end up in landfills. And as a society, we can't let that happen.
It is both criminal and evil if there is food that could be used to feed people who are hungry and it isn't used. It's intrinsically so un-Jewish, yes?
I would call it a shanda.
A shanda.
It
yes,
is. It really is. And that's what pushed me into doing this work. What pushed me first was the poor. Reading, hearing, seeing stories. But what drove me, once I made a decision to do this, was waste. I was so disturbed. And everyone who comes to Israel talks about the bounty, the amount of food at the hotels, at events, in the restaurants. There's so much bounty of food, thankfully. The land of milk and honey, it really is. But when you're seeing and hearing about all the poor, and you know in your heart of hearts that there must be so much food waste, I was fortunate that I was able to just say, okay, I'm going to do this. And that, today we're distributing, as you said, over 700,000 meals a year, 10 million pounds of fruits and vegetables that we picked with our own hands, Last
What do you
year,
mean with your own hands?
well, we have a project. We call it the Leket Project. Leket is a biblical term which means gleaning. And we glean in the fields. We had about 45,000 volunteers.
Really?
Birthright groups, missions, bar and bat mitzvah missions, individuals who come to Israel, Israeli companies, soldiers, thousands and thousands of Israeli soldiers, school kids who come, and this is their way of helping out, helping society.
They come, and where do they go, literally?
They come to fields throughout Israel. They pick for generally between 1 to 3 hours, and they help us out. I mean, I can give you an example. I was on a phone call 30 minutes ago with a rabbi from Florida. I didn't think he knew anything about us. And he tells me, what do you mean? In December, I was with my congregation, and I picked tomatoes in your field in Rehovot. So it's a beautiful project. It allows people to connect with the land in a way they never could, and help the needy at the same time.
Were these lands that are basically just standing there waiting for people to come and pick, were they planted by someone?
Yeah, what's going on is that farmers are the biggest gamblers of anyone. You know, you put your seeds in the ground, and 6 months later, you don't know what the price is going to be in the market. Sometimes prices are low, and despite all the hard work the farmer's done, it doesn't make sense for him to pay people to pick his fields. Acts of God happen where the fruit is damaged slightly, and that's how the project started, with a guy who called me who grows persimmons, and he said, I've had a hailstorm, and I'm in the export business. Everything needs to be AAA. So he said, they're yours. Low prices in the market, actually lack of workers, which has always been a big story, certainly in the last 10 years since the Intifada started, where Palestinians used to do most of the picking on Israeli farms. Sometimes you have the Rabbanut, the rabbis, who come in and say, this is not a bug-free lettuce, and someone's in the business of doing bug-free lettuce, and he says, that's not my business, I'm not going to bother picking it. So we come in, and we have a telemarketing team, 3 ladies who spend every day calling farmers. We have a database of 30,000 farmers, calling them, what do you grow, where are you, how can we help you?
And I'm gathering that a rabbinic hechsher and kashrut, while obviously you're going to observe the laws of kashrut, you're willing to, how shall I say, expand the amount of produce. You want to be able to distribute as much as you can, so that something that might not be acceptable within a strictly kosher definition, but is still edible, usable food for people, you will distribute.
Okay, I'll make a few points to that question. It's a great question. First of all, we're an Israeli organization. We're not a religious organization. We're not a kosher organization. We're Israeli, okay? And what I mean by that is, and we used to call ourselves Israel's Food Rescue Network in the earlier days. That was before we called ourselves the National Food Bank. I guess I'm like my friend who renamed his synagogue, like I was telling you before. And what we wanted to do is we want to get our hands on any kind of food. Now we have to be respectful. And what that means is we try our best to make sure that communities get the type of food that they want to eat, and that of course has the kashrut levels that they need. So first of all, even though we're not a religious organization, we do not distribute non-kosher food to Jews, because I don't need that. I always tell people my biggest nightmare is that I'll accidentally deliver a thing of shrimp to certain communities in Israel, and then I'm going to be on a dartboard, okay, or they'll be protesting in front of my house. So we try to avoid things like that, but there are a lot of non-Jews in Israel also who are perfectly happy to eat food that's not kosher. I can't let that go to waste. So for example, one of the beautiful projects that we have is on Fridays we pick up food that is being sold for Shabbat at Dizengoff Center in Tel Aviv. All that food is taken directly on Fridays to a park in South Tel Aviv where thousands of African refugees tend to hang out, those who don't have jobs. We set up tables and we feed these people. Every Friday, everyone agrees these people aren't Jewish, okay? There's no who is a Jew with them. So it's a really simple way of taking perfectly good food, which most of it's probably kosher, but it doesn't have a kashrut certificate.
I understand.
And getting it to people in need. And that's what we're about as an organization. We'll be respectful. We're not going to give Jews kosher food, even Jews who could care less about kashrut. That's just that's the rabbis I talked to. They said, Gitler, you're good at logistics. Figure it out. Just don't give Jews non-kosher food. And that's what we're doing. So it's not an issue with us. We're not looking for handouts. That's really the point of what Leket's about. any food we get is not I don't look at it as a donation. It's food which was going to be wasted anyway. So if it's going to be wasted, let us take it. It's shameful to allow it to waste. And that's why most of the people we speak to are more than happy to work with us. As long as we're professional and we do our job well, which I'm proud to say we do, almost every food donor we talk to says yes within 2 minutes. It's not a difficult conversation. We're not asking them for money. I mean, we do ask people for money because we need money to run the show. But we go to a large company. I'll give you an example. Strauss Elite, which is one of the biggest dairies in Israel, a wonderful partner of ours. They give us all their product, which is expiring 2, 3, 4 days in the future. Yogurts and cheeses and hummus and milk. Beautiful stuff that most charities can't afford. They used to actually pay in the past to have it destroyed.
I understand.
We come in, we're saving them money, and we're feeding the poor at the same time.
Okay, follow the path.
Yeah.
You pick up yogurt. Where does it go?
Okay. Generally, most of what we pick up comes back to our warehouse
In
Ra'anana, northern Ra'anana, so we can get a sense of what's come in. And then it gets redistributed through our 9 refrigerated trucks. So if you came to our warehouse, we have days where we're doing a Jerusalem run, we have days we do a southern run, a northern run. The point is that we try to distribute the food as much as we can directly to the agencies, because what we are looking to do is to allow a homeless shelter, a battered women's shelter, an after-school club for kids to focus on their work.
I see. And the organizations contact you, let you know of their need, and to the extent to which you can, you fulfill their need.
Exactly.
Aha, I understand. Okay. You have workers who also, I assume, work with the volunteers. I mean, you have volunteers, you have kids, Birthright Israel, you said, synagogue groups, but you also have a staff that also does the picking, yes?
Yes.
And who comprises that?
So we have, it's been a really fascinating project. For the last 3 years, we've had 22 Israeli Arab women who've been working for us full-time as paid pickers. And if you know anything about the Israeli economy, unfortunately, what I understand is Israeli Arab women are at the bottom of the totem pole. There have been terrible stories over the years. If they're lucky, they're getting paid minimum wage. Often they're not. They're not treated respectfully. And as a social service organization, we want to make a point, even though we're not an employment agency, we want to make a point of treating these women well. So to give you a few examples, since day one, we've always paid them 15% above minimum wage. We're not counting, we're not paying them by the bucket. Okay? We want them to be motivated, we want them to work hard, we want them to be successful because we want to feed the poor. But we're treating them just like all our other employees. They have actually, I always tell people, they have the same vacation as our employees, plus all the Muslim vacations. So they actually get a lot of extra vacation. And for the first time in their lives, these women are being paid properly, directly. No one's getting in the way.
That's wonderful.
And while it wasn't imagined as a coexistence initiative, it's turned into one. I get calls all the time from the mayors of the towns where these women live asking us when we're going to expand the project, which we can do if we have the resources.
It's interesting. You go to Israel just before the first Intifada. You turn around, there is an Intifada. It's now 11 years later. When you look at what's called the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and you talk among your friends, do you now, as an Israeli, believe there is, at this point in time, a possibility of a meaningful peace process resuming?
Personally, I don't speak for Leket or for anyone but myself.
This is just you and me.
I don't think we have a choice. I believe we have to. I live there. I have 5 children living there. I have friends, family. I believe we have no choice but to find a way to make peace. We're not going anywhere, and they're not going anywhere. 2 very intransigent people. So I have to believe, because if you don't believe that there's, personally, if I don't believe that there's some way of making peace, then I find that to be a very hopeless situation. I mean, every generation we tell our boys, in your generation, there won't be an army, or the army will be an army of just a regular army like any other army in the world, not an army that's constantly at battle. So I do believe that one day will happen. I hope it's in my lifetime. I don't know when it's going to happen. I wish we did, but I don't think we have a choice. We have to find a way.
Does the Palestinian leadership that exists now offer you a sense of hope?
There's certain individuals that...
Like whom?
I think the current Palestinian Prime Minister, who just had surgery in Texas.
Fayyad.
Fayyad seems like a pretty reasonable character, but I'm not involved in these issues enough.
But people are suggesting to me that the Hamas-Fatah deal is a way of pushing Fayyad out, that Fayyad's future in the Palestinian Authority is now very unlikely.
Which seems to me to be a shame, because people are, Western governments really like this guy. And the Israelis in power seem to have a pretty good working relationship with him, which is what we need. We need people that we can work with. And I think that's really the issue, is finding people that we can work with, that we can make agreements with. It's never going to be a warm relationship. What scares me is when I came September 2000, people were shopping. Friends of mine, religious people living around, they'd drive to the West Bank. They would go to garages there. They'd go shopping there. You'd buy furniture. It was like going to the Far East. It was cheaper. People do that. People go shopping. You could do what it felt like one country together, and that's been destroyed. I don't know for how many generations. So while there may be some sort of agreement one day, I don't see a situation where it's going to be sort of situation where my kid is going to go over to get his car fixed in Ramallah because it's a cheaper garage. I don't see that sort of relationship, which is, it's sad in a way, but that seems to be the reality that we're living with now.
Do you believe that there is a Palestinian people who are prepared to live in peace with the State of Israel, as opposed to retaining this driving longing to have all of the land back for themselves?
I like to believe, and again, this is for my own sanity, that most people are realistic and understand that the State of Israel is a strong state of nearly 8 million people. It's not going anywhere. We've built a wonderful society, a wonderful economy. We're there to stay. I think most people understand that, and there are, of course, extremists, and that's what always causes the problems. What percentage of them want the State of Israel to disappear? I don't know what it is, whether it's 0.5% or 1% or a few thousand. But I think most people just want to make a living, have a house above their heads, a car, not worry about violence. I think that's what most people want. And we have to figure out how to push those people who don't want that out of the way, get rid of them.
Do you know any Palestinians yourself?
No, I don't.
Do you hate Palestinians?
I don't hate anyone. I hate anyone who hates me, but I don't really, I don't know who those people are. I don't. It's not part of my. By the way, that might be part of the problem. A better question would be: do you know any Israeli Arabs?
Why is that a better question?
Not a better question, but I'm living in Israel, and
But you do know Israeli Arabs because you
a
work
little
with
bit.
them.
I work with them, but do I really know them? Are we breaking bread together? Are we inviting each other to our smachot, to our events? And that's part of the issue in Israel also, is we're living together in a society. Was it any different here in America? How many African Americans was I friends with? We live in our own little bubble.
Yes.
So here in the United States, it works pretty well because this is a country at peace. Not that there are never any issues that come up. There certainly are, and we're not that distant from slavery and the issues that we had in this country. But as an Anglo Jew living in Israel, that gives me a little bit of distance. So I excuse myself a little bit because I'm an immigrant to the country. But if you look at my kids, say, what is the likelihood of them having any sort of connections with the other, even within the State of Israel? It's slim. Perhaps at university, there could be Israeli Arabs or Druze or Bedouins. So yes, because of Leket Israel, I do some work with those communities. But am I close with any of them?
Or social with them?
Social?
Not really.
Not really. Okay, so it may be a little bit because of my Orthodox. There are many ways you can slice the pie to explain that. But I think, part of perhaps one day making peace with the Palestinians is our coming to grips better with the Israeli Arab community in our midst, because Israeli Arabs most consider themselves part of the State of Israel, but there is a connection and affinity to their Palestinian brothers. And that's what sometimes creates the wedge that I'm not sure we can have been able to figure that out yet. Maybe we won't figure it out.
You and your friends, if it turned out that a peace agreement with the Palestinians meant giving up most of what is now known as the West Bank and tearing down Israeli settlements deep into the West Bank, would that be something you and your friends would accept?
I think some of my friends would accept it, and some of my friends wouldn't accept it. I live in a very heterogeneous community. We're in Ra'anana, which is, on the, one side of the Green Line. If the American Jewish community even allows us to use those sort of terms, I'm always concerned here with whatever I find.
The Green Line's okay.
Yeah,
That's
I
the
find here.
one we use.
Interestingly, I find here that many American Jews are a lot more right wing than any
It's
Israeli Jews.
unbelievable.
It's very interesting,
Joseph,
sort of.
most people who sit in that chair are not nearly as either optimistic or as gentle about this as you are. I mean, very often I will have somebody sitting there who tells me that there's no question we, the Jewish people in the state of Israel, want peace. But there's no interlocutor on the other side who really wants peace with us. And they will give me many, many examples and reasons why that's true. Many of them are very compelling.
Without a doubt, and they'll tell me that I'm naive, and we all want them to be wrong. Okay?
Yes.
We want me to be right. I
Yes.
think most people, maybe
Yes.
not the point about the settlements and all that. That will be sad for all Jews, the same way that Gaza was a terribly, I'm very involved in issues of people who were left Gush Katif and are struggling. Very involved in those in Leket and personally, and it'll be very distressing to most Jews for people to leave their homes. But I think even many people, if we had a crystal ball, I think this is always the point. If we had the crystal ball
Yes.
that showed that we would have a real peace,
Yes.
whatever that means, I like to believe that most Jews would accept a peace agreement. I like to believe that because to have the opportunity to, my shul is named after Ari Weiss, who was killed in Shechem 8 years ago, Rabbi Stuart Weiss's son, who writes in the Jerusalem Post. To not have to, I'm involved in building something in Ra'anana called Habayit Shel Benji, which is a home for lone soldiers named after Benji Hillman, a commander 3 weeks after he was married, who made the decision to go into Gaza. He didn't need to, from a Jewish law point of view. It's right in the Torah that soldiers like that don't need to go to war. And from his commander's, and he went in. I think like all Israelis, I'm sick and tired of stories like that. Am I naive? Maybe I'm not. Maybe I am naive, and maybe I'm just being silly, and that we should just accept the fact that we need to be, we need to be that way, and that it's always going to be this way, and it's not going to be any other way. I hope I'm not naive. I really do. I have to pray that way because I'd like to wake up one day in the morning and not have to worry about my 18-year-old. So he'll be in the army. There's not going to be an army. They're all going to the army. I'd like the fact that all he's doing is shooting practice. That would be wonderful. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. I have kids in my community going to the most elite units. We are such a motivated community. And, I think we would all love an opportunity to have peace and quiet, especially veteran Israelis. I'm a newbie. Been there only 11 years, but look at the 11 years I've lived through there. Okay? I mean, the Intifada was a hellish time. So the fact that, there was no bomb that blew up on my block, okay, lucky us. Or that nothing happened in Ra'anana, lucky us. But it's happening everywhere around us, okay? And we were just as affected by it as everyone else. So we want quiet. People in my community may watch this, and, for all I know, people are going to be picketing outside my house. I don't know. But I want to believe that, most people on the other side want peace. Problem is, is getting to those people. And that's been, because the fact is, when you have evil people who do horrible things and blow people up and set off bombs and murder innocent families while they're sleeping, then hope gets lost and those voices get drowned out very quickly. So we have to stop.
But my guess is the voice you have is not a lone voice. You must have friends that you and your wife have who share your hope.
Well, I can't speak for my wife in this.
Oh,
okay?
no.
She may have different opinions than me, and I wouldn't want her to watch this and say, please don't take...
Well, are you telling me, you've never discussed this with her?
We do discuss these things.
Well, you know her position then.
She's not of exactly the same... She's not of exactly the same position that I am on these things. She's more...
She's less hopeful?
She's less hopeful, certainly, than I am. Okay, and she would say I'm more naive than she is, but I know friends in my community.
In your synagogue, if I went to your shul, what would I hear?
I think if you went to my shul, most people would not sound like me.
They would not.
No. But there are people who would. But the people who talk like me, we're much quieter about these things. We get drowned out. It's not a big topic it's a topic on people's tables, but it's not a topic in the synagogue.
How interesting.
Our rabbi doesn't talk about, we're living in, I think the point is, we live in Israel, we live this experience. Our rabbi doesn't need to spend every speech on Shabbat talking about the political situation in Israel. He talks about Torah, and he talks about lessons we can learn from the Torah. Okay?
I approve of that.
And I think that's, a lot of rabbis, like the rabbi in Teaneck that I grew up with, he didn't talk politics. He talked about the state of Israel and supporting the state of Israel.
Not from a bima on Shabbat.
Correct.
But it doesn't mean that there couldn't be discussion groups in the synagogue, and certainly there could be discussions among your friends after services, before services, at a kids thing you're at.
No doubt people are talking about these issues all the time, but I think people are more focused on my kids going to the army,
Yes.
my kids doing national service. We're just trying to live life. I think when something's far away, you can focus on it more, and we just want to live life and not have to think about politics day in, day out. I think a lot of people just want to avoid it and try not to pay attention to it.
Joseph Gitler, I'm proud to have met you.
Thank you very
I'm
much.
proud to have been able to bring you to our audience. I'm hoping everybody becomes not only aware of you, but wherever they can, they help you. I hope any of us who travel to Israel are now aware of what you might be doing, even around us as we travel through the land. Kol tuva hatzlacha in all of the work you do, and I hope from time to time you'll sit with me. I enjoy you very, very much. You're
My
a very
pleasure.
special
Whenever
man.
you'll have me on, I'll be happy to be here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And those were the thoughts of Joseph Gitler, founder and chairman of Leket Israel, Table to Table in English, Israel's National Food Bank, also Israel's Food Rescue Network. And again, if you'd like to help Joseph in his very important work, visit Leket Israel's website at www.leket.org or call the American Friends of Leket Israel at 201-331-0070. And again, if you'd like to be in touch with Joseph himself, a very special human being, you may email him at joseph@leket.org. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who can send a tax-deductible contribution of $36 or more to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media to help support our programming. Tax-deductible checks may be made out to GEM and mailed to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. Please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD, and we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.